Alright, I'm responding to Carla's argument. It was about carbon emissions in building. And her proposition is that on-site generated power systems would be more advantageous, and that's backed up by 3 claims. 1, on-site generated power would decrease the amount of carbon emissions released in the transportation of energy. 2, on-site renewable energy costs less. And 3, on-site renewable energy is accessible and requires little maintenance. My claim as a response is that sustainable building operations in the United States will not make a significant difference in carbon emissions globally. So my response to her introduction is she has some data that says the main source of carbon emissions results from the building sector, specifically building operations that consume 70% of the energy used in the US. So 70% sounds like a lot. However, I wasn't really able to find information that I could compare this to, but I found, according to the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, they say that the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity, which is used to power building operations, was responsible for 29% of carbon emissions in the US in 2015. So if this stated 70% statistic is true, we can conclude that building operations would be responsible for about, at most, 20% of US carbon emissions per year. And now 20% does sound like a lot. However, globally, according to the World Resources Institute, the US is responsible for 14.36% of the world's carbon emission, and that's second to China, being the largest at 26.83%. So globally, we can say that building operations in the United States per year contribute to 2.872% of the world's carbon emission. So it's actually not that much. And my response to the first claim, which is on-site generated power would decrease the amount of carbon emissions released in the transportation of energy, is that on-site renewable energy systems such as solar panels actually add to the carbon emissions. And according to Christina Nunez of the National Geographic, she says that fabricating the panels requires caustic chemicals such as sodium hydroxide and hydrofluoric acid. And the process uses water as well as electricity, the production of which emits greenhouse gases. It also creates waste. These problems could undercut solar's ability to fight climate change and reduce environmental toxins. So I guess the argument towards how solar panels are more green, I think, is diminished because of this claim. And her second claim is that on-site renewable energy costs less. And I think that renewable energy and solar panels are not affordable to a lot of people because although most of the cost is basically the installation fee, they could range from like $11,000 to like $20,000. And I think that's out of the budget for a lot of people, especially because it's not totally necessary. Additionally, the EPA states that residential households by themselves are only responsible for 12% of US carbon emissions. Globally, this would only equate to about 1.7% per year, which is even less than stated before. And my response to the third claim, which is on-site renewable energy is accessible and requires little maintenance, is that renewable energy is accessible to everyone. Everyone can get renewable energy systems, however, they have to pay for it. And as I stated in the last claim, that a lot of people don't want to do this because it's not totally necessary. And my response to the claim that of its maintenance is that solar panels have a limited lifespan before producing unsatisfactory results. According to Energy Sage, which is a solar energy company, which was also used in my opponent's argument, they state that solar panels will typically last 25 to 30 years. However, this doesn't mean that they stop producing electricity after 25 years. It just means that energy production has declined by what manufacturers consider a significant amount. What I'm trying to say with this is that people spend a lot of money to get their solar panels installed, but over 25 to 30 years, and you have to account for, it takes a very long time for the money that they paid to get the solar panels installed to, like, it takes a long time to get their money back from what they paid for. And over that time period, their solar panels are decreasing in its productivity. So, thank you.
All right, I want to start on the last argument because you have an interesting idea here that it takes a long time to get return on the value that they put into this, and during that process, the effectiveness of the panels has decreased. The amount of the decrease is not really explained. It just says they become less efficient over time. So they might last 25 to 30 years, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't work at all at that point. They just become decreased efficiency. But we never get any estimate about how long it takes to cover the cost and whether or not that decreased efficiency is going to have any impact on that in the long run. The problem with this argument is that it's all about the cost issue, and I think you addressed the cost issue a lot more up on the first point, so it doesn't necessarily specifically deal with the issue that the advocate's presenting on that third point as clearly as it could. On the other points, first of all, everything's nicely organized. I do think that you have your counterclaim. You have a general counterclaim that you're presenting. If that's what you want to do, that's okay. But you do want to follow the same guidelines that we talked about, and you want to get rid of the negative phrasing in the proposition that you've got. The individual supporting points are labeled very clearly. Your first point attempts to diminish the importance of the contribution to carbon by the business sector, and I thought you did a nice job kind of explaining some statistical information, how you combine those. You get it down to 2.2%, and I thought that that was a nice explanation. Then the question becomes, if it's only 2.2%, how much of that would be eliminated by these kinds of on-site power generation? That's something that I'm not sure that the advocate ever presented, so I think you're missing a press that you could make there, and of course that that it's insignificant. Even if it was half of the energy and we were doing half as much, that makes it even less significant and important. So I think that you've got the right argument here, you've got some good statistics here, but you need to kind of summarize that argument a little bit more effectively. Then I thought that when you talked about potential, you got a counterclaim on potential problems and drawbacks from that I think would diminish whatever advantage there was if you could quantify that. You don't really have anything that's quantifiable here. You just have some general information about what the process of producing these solar panels is, and that's good information. It's generic information about potential environmental hazards. But if we were doing an on-balance discussion of it, it's awfully hard to say that on balance it's going to have this impact based on the claim that you have there. It's a nice piece of evidence. I think you need another piece of information that would quantify that sort of thing. The cost argument we've talked about a little bit. I thought you had a good argument on the third point, especially that applied to that, and the long-term return is good. You do get back to the issue of housing, though, and I think that that's another way that you're kind of duplicating the diminishing argument on the first point, that it's a relatively small part of the energy sector and the CO2 issue. So you're diminishing the argument quite effectively, and like I said, the cost argument comes up, and I think you've got good arguments there too. Thank you.